Taos done anything, and they're going to be quiet for however long they're going to be quiet over the next 4 weeks, early training camp next month. I know that turns this guy on because he's a Ravens fan. He's also one of our great sponsors here at WNST, Bill Cole of Cole Roofing, one of my friends that I have an adult libation with from time to time and chat sports, and of course he's at Cole Roofing and at Fister Energy. We'll get to all the promotional parts of all this, but one of my favorite parts of our relationship and meeting through CEO groups and whatnot is leadership, and you and I spent a lot of time talking about that through the course of our relationship. And boy, this Barry Trotz story and the Caps, and I know you're not the biggest hockey fan, you don't have all the color and the background on all of this, but you did see the color red in Washington last week. You did see the parade. I'm sure everywhere you're going, fixing roofs in the DMV, as they like to call it, you're seeing red now. I have my Believe shirt on. I'm always a one arm reach away from my Stanley Cup hat, Bill. But, boy, the Barry Trotz thing, I go back to Davey Johnson around here, and Davey Johnson was kind of famously a miserable prick. And Barry Trotz is the exact opposite. There was disdain for Peter Angelos at that time, and obviously after John Miller and everything else that went on. But changing leadership and changing a coach when you're winning, the Red Sox did it last year. The Yankees did it last year. Teams have done this. This is not kind of crazy in the modern era. But it sure isn't a good look on the backside of this thing with Barry Trotz for the Caps. It sure looks like they're cheapskates, right? And it sure looks like they've said, well, you're really an important part of winning here. You're only worth $1.8 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely smells. Happy to chat with you, Ness. Yeah, it smells. To your point, I don't know all the backstories, but just from a very outside perspective, it smells, and it does seem to be part of a bigger, overarching movement in the coaching ranks, where people are trying to go younger, and then you don't see as many of the old guys kind of making the rounds. So it's an interesting trend to watch.
Well, you and I have made payrolls for years. I mean, I'm in my 20th year of owning WNST on August 3rd. It'll be our 20th anniversary. Don't worry, Bill. I'll be talking about that out on the internet because, I know 105.7 won't be. But I'll say this. In doing this, the payroll of hockey is lower than football, right? And obviously in baseball, you can do whatever you want, right? So with the Orioles, with Chris Davis, there's no salary cap. And the salary cap in the NBA is kind of weird, and it precludes you from moving players and whatnot. But in the NFL, the one thing that you don't have control over is how much you pay your coaches, right? Well, the NHL's similar in that way, right? So the NHL has a salary cap now. It used to be a day when the Red Wings and the Rangers and the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens made more money than anybody else because they had bigger brands. Now there is a salary cap and a legitimate hard cap in the NHL where everybody spends to the same number. Not every team makes that amount of money. Like the Bengals have always been sort of notorious cheapskates. I know the Oakland Raiders were that way. The Buccaneers were that way for years as well in not spending to the cap. But in the NHL, the one thing you have some freedom to do is buy a better coach, right? Like it's like the NFL. There's no rule as to how much you're going to spend on a coach. And certainly in the NFL, 10 years ago when my pal and partner Brian Billick got thrown out of Owings Mills, part of the Harbaugh thing was we're going to get cheaper, we're going to get younger, we're going to get cheaper, we're going to get younger. And for Gruden, Dungy, Billick, any number of these Super Bowl ring-wearing coaches, they said, well, I'm a $7 or $8 million coach now. And Steve Bisciotti and the Tennessee Titans and everybody else said, well, we'll just hire Brad Childress for $1.8 million, or we'll just hire the next young guy for cheap. And, there's certainly something to be said for that. But when you've won the championship, when you got 500,000 people out in the street, when you're making money, when you're the best team on earth, when the last coach you hired was the first coach to come in and fulfill this promise of winning President's Cups, of playing into the playoffs, of going to Game 7s, of winning a Stanley Cup, I don't know how you say to the fan base, well, that guy wasn't important. We're just going to plug and play the assistant. I don't believe that. I don't believe they would have won the Stanley Cup this year without Barry Trotz.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would want to disrupt like the good mojo that they have going right now. You kind of want to ride that tidal wave for as long as it lasts, and you couldn't be any higher right now than they are. So why would you want anything to disrupt that? It comes back to maybe part of this lack of loyalty in sports that was created by the, managed and controlled salary structures. So even though you can pay your coach as much as you want, you still have a lack of loyalty that flows through the whole organization, other than when you go to the player and you ask them for the hometown discount because you're trying to make it all work. Other than that piece, there's a general lack of loyalty, and everybody wants to talk about it's a business, and I understand, and it's,
But it's not when you're in there saying fight for your brother, fight for your teammate, lay your body on the line, jump in front of that puck, go fight with that guy to protect that guy. All of that exists in hockey, and that becomes certainly it exists in football. Baseball's a little different. Baseball, see the ball, hit the ball, hit a home run, be a hero. It's a little different than football and hockey, which are much more physical, spiritual, mental, team-oriented, give of yourself, lay your body on the line, lay your health on the line for this other player. That's a different spirit. And you're asking people to go on roofs for a living, which would frighten me if I had to get on the roof of my building and do something for 5 minutes or clean the windows and hang off a rope on a building or whatever. But, people ask different things, but I think hockey and football, the thing as a coach you preach about being together, being in it, and Billy pointed this out 18 years ago, time for pay, right, and a time for play, and there needs to be a very, very, very steep cliff and a valley between those two things, because when one bleeds into the other, you get what the Orioles are doing right now, which is just waiting to leave, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, I think maybe with I was going to say the exception of the Jordan-era Bulls, but even that, you still had role players who bought in, and everybody was on the same team, and that's why they were able to go win. I still think baseball applies to this too, because you don't want your leadoff hitter trying to hit a home run. He has a job. You need your relief pitchers to accept their role and do their job. So, and loyalty, go pick a championship-winning team who doesn't appear, from our perspective, to have this buy-in on playing for your brother and all the things that you just said. If you look at the Patriots, they talk about that a lot. You do your job, everybody does their job, we'll be fine. But on some level, there's a disconnect between getting paid and doing your job, because the pay follows certain statistics and certain important pieces that people pay for. Well, if you're the guy who can hit 20 home runs, but they really just ask to, hit singles and steal a couple bases, that's going to affect your paycheck. Take that to the manager level, and I think that message has to flow through the manager. And when Buck comes to the team and says, hey, this is what you need to do and this is what you need to do, if there's no confidence in that guy, or they can't see what it's in it for them, then I think you lose the team. So that's why the undervalue of the loyalty and sticking with the coach and finding consistency, although they don't have to necessarily be the recruiter because the paycheck is what pays, there still is recruiting going on. The salaries are still controlled, so guys have options, and they've got to evaluate teams. And
well, it's with the market, right? If the market says Barry Trotz is a $5 million coach, then you should pay him $5 or $5 million, or he's willing to give you a hometown discount. In the Capitals case, people have asked me about it. It's really simple. Everyone knows I'm inside with Barry. It became very apparent to me, not just from Barry, but from the media around the team that I traveled with in Tampa and Vegas, and the people on the inside, and Barry himself, which was, these people don't like me that much around here. You know what I mean? They don't value me that much, or they wouldn't have hired the general manager for a longer term. They wouldn't hire my assistant coach and give him a longer term deal. They wouldn't be threatening to fire me, every 90 days around here. So, and then when it came time for him to put the proof in the pudding and win the Stanley Cup and put the trophy on the table, and then he came back and said, well, what am I worth? They said, not that much. So I sort of validated, I think, what he already believed, which is they don't think I'm that big of a part of winning around here. And they certainly don't think I'm valuable, and they think they can get a cheaper guy to do a better job or as good a job as I would do. And if that's the case, then I'll go coach the Islanders or, go watch television for a year or go sit in the NHL studios. And, and I think that's not a good reflection upon the Caps. I'll say that. And look, and I'll be done with the Caps. Bill Cole is here, Cole Roofing. For those of you who don't know, Billy's been a friend of mine for well over a decade and a listener here for probably longer than that. He does commercial roof space and corporate roof spaces, as well as green spaces and solar panels on roofs, which sounds a little James Bond, but I'll let Bill tell you about it. Give him the elevator speech, Bill, because I want to talk some more real baseball with you, too.
Sure. Cole Roofing, born in 1919. We're coming up on our 100th. We're a commercial roofing contractor. Everything from a $500 leak call all the way up to $5 million new construction schools. We do a lot. We do a lot in the service space, and I think now is probably a good time to think about that. Maybe you don't currently have a roof problem, but you're somewhere in between year 5 and year 20 of your roof system.
What does a 100-degree day for a couple days that we had earlier in the week? What is that? I've always thought, like, when I lived on Bank Street and Dundalk, we had the black roof, and they would bring the tar out, and it stunk. By the way, I got behind a roofing tar truck in the tunnel coming back from Pizza John's on Tuesday night. You got to stop that. No tunnels for tar, okay? But anyway, I always thought on those hot days, I would see, like, the black tar in the sidewalks when I was a kid, and it would kind of, like, melt, literally melt. Sure. It would get, like, you could take a rock and dig it up. We used to do that when we were kids and pull it up. But I'm sure that every roof in Baltimore sort of baked on Monday and Tuesday, right? Literally.
Yeah, UV rays definitely degrade the roof over time. It's probably one of the top 3 killers. That's why you see a lot of roofs nowadays are white, or you take that black roof that you were talking about and you can coat it with some aluminum coating, and that'll help extend the life. So there are things you can do to try and protect it from the sun. The sun will beat it up and degrade it over time. I think the goal is right now, nobody thinks about the roof. It's out of sight, out of mind. But there are incremental things you can do that aren't that costly that can help extend the life. So try and get that in your brain somewhere where once
no one wants a new roof. Let's fix the roof we got, right? Okay,
sure.
Fair enough.
Absolutely.
All right, Cole Roofing's there, and Pfister Energy, and he puts solar panels on the roof, and it makes you money. And there's a great debate about that. We'll have that one later, too. All right, dude, I'm doing my Dear Orioles series, and everybody here, I'm giving sort of the open rein to talk about any of these issues. I am writing a personal letter, newspaper columnist style, every other day, beginning this week for the next month and a half. I've got my list. I'm starting with what does the franchise owe the community, no matter who owns it, right? This isn't about Peter. Then I'm going to write a letter to Peter and tell him how much he sucked over the last 25 years and the ways. And then I'm going to ask John what he's going to do about it and Lou. And then I'm going to ask Brady what his qualifications are. And then I'm going to ask Buck what he saw in all of this, and Dan Duquette as he goes out the side door. And then I'll get to Machado and Jones and Davis and Scope. And I'm going to go down the list. They're all getting letters from me. And then Gary Thorne's going to get one, and Jim Palmer's going to get one. Our friends over at Masson, Jimmy Hunter, Rick Dempsey, they're all going to get letters from me over the next month, and I hope you read them. But for you in this era and where we are as a concerned Oriole fan, citizen baseball fan, we've been through your kids not being interested and kids free and all that. But from a management perspective, this is really going to be quite the show over the next 3 to 6 months, right? Like, let alone whatever happens with Machado and Jones and these deadlines that are coming up. Then there's the deadline at the end of the year with Showalter and Duquette. Then there's how many 100 and some odd games they're going to lose. All of this is going to happen, but somebody's going to have to manage it. And right now, do you have any level of confidence that there is, like, a competent decision maker involved anywhere in the process here that is going to step up and emerge as something that can give the fans, the business owners, the partners, whatever, confidence that this is going to get better, not worse?
No, but no, I have no confidence, but I don't know that that's not professional sports as it is. They all tend to be so protective of the last 2 months of the gate, or the last 3 months, or the last 5 games in football, or whatever it is. I mean, the writing's on the wall. Your gate they can probably do the math, and they know about how much they can hope to get. And if you came out publicly today and said, this one's a wash, we're going to just start building, okay, maybe you lose 50% of the gate that you were hoping to get. I think the number's already so low that that's not actually that scary. And if you came out and said, look, our goal is we want to find the next manager, we want to use the couple chips that we have to get some really exciting young players so that when we show up next spring, we've got an entire lineup full of potential, all-star players, and let's go have a run at it. But you don't see any, there's no communication, so that's just conjecture on my part.
Communication. That's not something the Angelos family's been good at. And that continues. And I would say, for any of these seminars we go to, and I've run into Tony Robbins the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to be doing a seminar with him later on in the year on personal development, human development, and it really all does begin with communication, doesn't it? I mean, literally, no matter what line of work you're in, no matter what marriage you're in, no matter what relationship you're in with a kid, an animal, me and my cat, there has to be some level of communication. Boy, that's sort of lost on the Angelos family, isn't it? I mean, and maybe at the top of all of this is they are poor communicators about whatever their intentions are. And most of the time with the old man, in the end, after I did a little bit of research, it's all about greed and avarice and power and beating people up. I mean, that's who Peter was. I mean, that was his communication style. Not really dissimilar to what the creep down on Pennsylvania Avenue's done lately. It's beating people up. It's intimidation. It's do this or else I will punish you. And that's been the way they've done things from the beginning, literally with every relationship they've handled.
Well, I think what you just said, I translated not so much as greed as it is control and power. And, communication can be a way that people, where you can help bring control to something that's out of control, like what everybody thinks about the Orioles. I think
but it's a dialogue. It's not a monologue.
Right.
I sit here and monologue. Right. The dialogue is they have to talk back. They haven't said a word in 20 years, literally, right? Like, literally, Peter has not had a press conference or really spoken to anyone since he stood on the field at the Ripken thing in 95 for 14 minutes and got booed off the field. He never, ever, ever has really shown his face publicly in front of the fan base to address the fan base in any way since 1995. I mean, it's really, I don't know that there's anything like it in sports where you can't be accountable. I mean, you could say that about Hal Steinbrenner or whatever, Wizard of Oz owns the Cubs or whatever, but someone is out in front of that every day speaking on behalf of the business, and that's just never been an important part of what the Orioles do.
Right. And to your point, even if the message is, hey, look, we're taking a really hard look at this and trying to come up with a plan, in the meantime, we love our players and we're committed to, they're to your point, there's no message, which is, it begins with frustration, and then to the point now, it's just, we're maligned and, like you don't even care, like it just doesn't, it's not even a thing that registers because they're not talking to anyone. How many times can you and I sit down and try and guess what's going on? Right, and I don't know.
But in the end, it's much like Ozzy, right? Like we sit for 3 months and say, who's Ozzy going to draft? I guess now it'll be Eric. Who's he going to draft? Well, then the draft night happens, and they're on 16 and they don't take anybody. So they didn't like any of those guys. Then they go back to at that number. Then they go back to 22 and they don't like any of those guys. Then they go back to 25 and they take a tight end, and you're like, well, clearly they didn't like the wide receivers, and they didn't like that quarterback from Louisville, right? And then 6 picks later, they trade back in and take the quarterback from Louisville, which lets you know they like the quarterback from Louisville more than they liked the wide receivers, more than they liked the linemen, more than they liked any of those other guys. I think at some point it does play out. And you do see who Buck Showalter likes and who is in John Harbaugh's doghouse when Kamalei Correa is not on the field, right? Or when Brashad Perryman's a healthy scratch. You know, you see the conjectures there and the opinions are there, but then they actually make a move, like leaving Zach Britton in the bullpen in the 11th inning in Toronto with the season on the line. Like, those decisions are made, and you say, well, that's what he's thinking. That's obviously what he's thinking because, I mean, we found out what the Capitals thought of Barry Trotz, and conversely, we found out what Barry Trotz thought of the Capitals. You know, we don't have to wonder anymore. With the Orioles, because they never say anything, I guess we always wonder until August 1st comes and Machado isn't traded. Then we'll know. Well, they think the sandwich pick is more valuable than whatever the Cubs were going to trade him or whatever, right? So, you know, it does come out in the wash in the end what was on people's minds because their actions speak louder than their words, I guess, right? And for the Orioles, their actions over 25 years have done all the speaking for them, and it leaves for a monologue because they don't talk back other than with their actions.
If the people have no connection to the players or the manager, I mean, understand that leadership technique of not communicating is setting the example that flows all the way through the whole organization. You know, like, think about the conversation we've had in the past about, as a kid, you would run into, like, Oriole players all the time. Like, and I'm not talking about randomly at the grocery store. I'm saying they were out doing things as members of the community all the time. And that, you know, that changed. That probably changed back in the 90s where these players stopped coming out. So
they needed the $500 back in the day. You know, when Mike Flanagan would sign autographs at East Point Mall, and the $250 or $500 they gave him in 1979 on a Saturday morning to come over and sign autographs. I mean, you know, dude was making $48,000 a year or whatever, and you know, doing 10 of those gigs a year augmented his income by 15%. All of a sudden, by 1994, when players are making on average, you know, $390,000 a year, they didn't need the $500 on a Saturday morning. They slept in. And it wasn't worth more than that. And, you know, I've been in this business for 25 years where I see, you know, businesses give Terrell Suggs $80,000 to come sign autographs for 4 hours, and 5 years later they're out of business. I've seen that happen all the time. But Terrell Suggs isn't crossing the street for $5,000, you know, literally, because he's got $100 million. So that's where it is, literally, you know.
I get that.
Which makes Flacco all the more special when he comes out and does stuff, because he still comes out and does stuff, even though he's got 5 kids and he's running around. If I ask Joe to do something, he'll do something because he's a good guy, you know. But it doesn't always work that way, you know.
But that's the part I'm talking about. So every year I get a book from the Ravens that is literally just them tooting their own horn about how much work they do in the community. And I get that from a
I have that right here, by the way. I'm holding it up for you. You want to see it? I got it right next to my desk here. Community impact. There it is.
And I get that that's a PR piece, especially based on last year, that they need to do.
Steve Bisciotti hugging soldiers. You knew that was on. That's page 2. I mean, it's just like sort of right out of the playbook here. Then there's black and white together, and children and sick kids and hospitals and building houses and youth football and feeding kids and homeless shelters and special needs kids. I'm going page by page. There's Poe with some soldiers and John with some soldiers, and we love soldiers, and there's more flag. So, you know, I mean, it's puff. It doesn't. People don't look at this and register and say, "Oh, I love the Ravens because they love America." They want to see football. I mean, literally, right?
Yeah, but it is a piece of communication that is part of their brand and part of the messaging that goes on for that team. Maybe nobody looks at that, but what is obvious is, do the Orioles make one of those? Can the Orioles even put a book together with all those pictures?
I'm sure they can. I'm sure. Just nobody knows about it because they hate the media that they don't control.
Right? They don't communicate. So to me, it's like I don't even know. Like, I don't feel good about their brand. Like, even when the Ravens run into a tough spot, they have established themselves, whether it's real or not. The brand perception in Baltimore is that the purple is generally good. So people put the stickers on their cars, and they did that, you know. So whether it's real or not.
What is the brand perception of the Orioles, by the way? You just said the brand perception of the Ravens is good. Well, it didn't look good when there were 30,000 empty seats, like for every game last year. So, I mean, but I'll go along with that. I'll agree with that. What is the brand perception of the Orioles? That's what I'm trying to drill into over the next 6 weeks, is to say, here's all the things that's wrong. And I know you're not going to write me back, right? I know you're not going to take a phone call. I know I can't come to a press conference. And that's probably the most effed up part of all of it. The most effed up part of it is I can write tombs of horrific stuff that's happened here, including the 100 games you're about to lose, including the best player of the generation for the second time you're about to lose after you lost Messina. Your owner's been a miserable prick for 25 years, and now he's mentally checked out, and you kids are in charge, and you've allowed your good-looking, former workout buddy, Brady, to run the place while he's got a jockstrap on playing chess in the clubhouse. Your management has no clue what's going on. You notoriously have the worst farm system in the sport. You have $130 million owed to a guy who's no longer a Major League Baseball player because your baseball people were not involved in that decision. And, oh, by the way, and if you can't pronounce someone's last name, or they're from Puerto Rico or the Dominican or Venezuela or Japan or Asia, we don't want anything to do with you because we're not even going to scout you. We're going to pretend you don't exist if you don't speak English and have white skin. That's who that is what the organization is. Oh, by the way, they're banned from Korea too, but that's another story. And there will be nothing said by them. There's no one that ferrets them out of their hole to let you know what they're going to do. But we're going to see what they're going to do over the next 6 months. We're going to see who they're going to hire and who they're going to fire and who they're going to trade and who they're going to put in charge. But I know one thing we're not going to do. We're not going to have John and Lou Angelos legitimately stand on a podium and say, come at us. It's on us from here moving forward. It's our team. It's no longer Peter. What Jim Irsay had to do out in Indianapolis and what Rocky Wirtz had to do in Chicago, which is separate himself from the stench of what his old man has created without ever throwing his old man under the bus. Good luck with that.
Well, I think there's some business reasons why they're probably not going to do that. But to get to your question of brand, I think you look at the brand as a rich heritage, sentimental brand, that has mostly historical good memories, but little to no impact in your daily life.
So what would you compare that to? Rich historical brand, like something that you don't use anymore that's still there and you used to use it, and you're like, oh, look, they still make that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that one. That we'll come up with something. But one other letter I thought maybe you should write after you get done all your letters. Try and write a letter to a 10-year-old Baltimore kid that you want to get excited about their baseball team. See if you can write that letter. And what are the things that you would tell them today? And you would end up writing it all about your great memories and the things that you experienced as a child, getting an autograph from so-and-so, catching a foul ball, eating too many hot dogs, keeping score. We've talked about that. So yeah, I mean, but so it's not just them, I guess was my only point there is we do have a responsibility as the community around the team to help, try and promote them and take shots, and they're not doing a lot to warrant our effort, which makes it, sort of a tough circle to keep going through. Is like every time I invest a little bit of energy, they let me down. So after a while, you give up.
I think over 25 years, I just think they're bad people, and they're bad at communicating, and they're bad at people skills. I mean, that is That's very apparent. I mean, I've in 25 years, for all the arrows I've flung at them, I've never had anybody walk up to me and say, John Angelos is a really good guy. I'll introduce you to him. We'll get some lunch. You'll like him. I've never had anybody tell me that.
Yeah, perception, you're really close to it. Like, I'm not.
But I have tens of thousands of people in my space.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody come up and say, you got this all wrong, dude. Let me help you fix this. I'll help you fix this. Pete's a reasonable guy. I've never, in the 2 hours that I've sat back and listened to my conversation with Peter Angelos 20 years later, dude, he lied and he lied and he lied more and he postured and he lied. I mean, he would have been phenomenal, corrupt politician. You know what I mean? Like, he would have been, I know he ran for office many times, and that was part of his Perry Mason, is to stand there and pontificate and tell you how things are and try to, convince you that his whacked out belief should be your belief. I've been through all of that, but they don't even do that anymore. They just roll the ball out and say, we're the Orioles. That's it, right? I mean, that has been their marketing strategy. We're the Orioles. You must love us. It says Baltimore on it. Ain't baseball great? Come on out. And here's a bobblehead sometimes, I guess.
And how is that different than the Ursays or even the Modells in Cleveland, or, insert whatever name you want, of someone who did something, horrific to a community, and then see that and see how that compares to Angelos, right? Because there isn't this one major event that everyone got mad at, and this is a long-term, years of neglect kind of deal. So I wonder how those two differ.
Fan neglect, you would say, right? Like, literally, communication neglect. Because they've won some games on the field. I mean, I have no doubt that they think they're trying to win, right? I mean, I saw Peter as being ultra competitive the first 10 years. But, I've had some chats with people this week and say, well, I think at some point he altered his belief in what winning was. Winning for him wasn't first place and losing $50 million, because he was losing $50 to $70 million a year every year at the turn of the century. 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, those years, he went underwater, $250, $300 million underwater. That was losing to him, which was, I have to take money out of the family coffers to pay my bills. That has not been the case the last 12 years. Winning on the field's been, nice, good, whatever, but they've won financially every minute of every day since Bud Selig put that team in D.C. So that there has been a lot of winning because the organization has made $80 to $100 million a year instead of losing $50 to $75 million a year. So I always try to bring that into perspective, especially for business owners, because you might do a nice job fixing roofs. You may have the best roofs in the world, but if your business isn't making money, then the good roofs are nice, but it's going to stop at some point because we're all in a for-profit mode. And for years, Peter lost money. The winning on the field thing, that's a nicety. As long as he's making money lately, it's been okay. And that's probably one of the reasons we haven't heard a whole lot of salesmanship out of him or anybody else. They don't really give a rat's ass when they're making $80 to $100 million, and they'll operate the team any way they want to operate the team, and they'll hire whomever they want and ban whoever they want and decide they don't want Asian players and they don't want Latin players and they don't want Toyota ads on the scoreboard because it's a Japanese company. All of that factors into this, but it's a much bigger factor when you're just making so much money that it doesn't matter. And they are making so much money and have for 12 years that it hasn't really mattered that they have a public perception or what people think of their brand. Or quite frankly, how many people are in the stadium.
Oh, yeah. Excuse me. There is an interesting story to follow because I'm sitting here thinking about how getting Camden Yards affected the trajectory of the team, right? So having Camden Yards selling out every game for however many years could have created, sort of the spoiled team owner. But if you correlate that with wins and losses and the dollars spent on players, I don't think that all matches up to a spoiled ownership group. It isn't until the Masson deal and the Nats come to town where, you know, you could look and say there's some level of spoiledness, or to your point, you know,
But they still call themselves a small market team, right? And now they point to Washington and the full stadium and Baltimore and the empty stadium, and they point to race and they point to riots and they point to downtown and crime, you know, and all of that. That's what they will point to when when the rubber meets the road. They'll say those things about why people aren't coming to the games and why people don't care about their brand here. I mean, they will.
Right, but there is a correlation that we don't like to make, or we don't. It's not that we don't like to make it; we don't pay attention to it. Like all those years, he's getting older, and his perception of the world changes. You know, his role in the community, the things that are important to him, those things all change and move, and his kids and people that are influencing him and all that stuff. So there is some, you know, behind the scenes storyline that you can pin up things that occurred on the law firm side and in Baltimore things, and you plot the whole chart out, and I would be curious as to what that looks like, because we expect them to behave consistently over, you know, 30 years, but you and I both know we've both changed a lot, you know, in the 10 years that we've known each other, and strive hard to get smarter or to make better decisions and things like that. So
but we've had to. We don't wake up with
sure.
our businesses making $100 million every year off the public teat. I mean, literally, once that started, accountability went out the door. Like, literally. Once they started making money no matter what they did, which is what the Masson deal did for them 12 years ago, then it just went off the rails as far as whether the community would have any stake, you know, or say, or was owed any explanation or communication. I mean, they truly feel like the fans don't matter. I mean, they shut the door of the stadium and played a ball game and told the fans to stay home. I mean, they're the only team in the history of sports that's ever done that, literally.
Right, but wouldn't if you had that situation as a fan of the game, wouldn't that free you up to go try and do this in a way that, you know, meets all of your sporting competitive needs?
Well, they did that. They gave money to Chris Davis.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, you know, that was an effort to try to win. But to your point, if you don't have strategy, which is, I guess, the thing over the next couple of weeks with trading these players, like, there is a real and true skill set. You know, it's like you saying to me saying to you, dude, 99 years cooking roofs. I mean, I could get up there and dump tar with the best of them. I've watched guys get on the roof. I know how to do a roof. All you got to do is not be afraid to get on a roof. You dump the tar and you got a roof. That's what it looks like, right? And it clearly hasn't been that easy to win in baseball or manage it in baseball. But it's a whole different thing when no matter what tar I dump, I'm making $100 million. And I can say, well, Chris Davis, we should give him $150 million. Just an incredibly poor decision that didn't come from anything baseball-oriented at all. It just sort of like all the other Angelos things, just sort of pops out of the rectum, and you're like, all right, let's give that to Chris Davis. And, well, this pitcher doesn't look like he's worth it. Let's send him over to medical and bust his medical up so he can knock $4 million off his deal. Because all of this stuff goes on, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens out in front of everyone. And I think we do judge it, and I think we do look at it and say, well, you're making all this money. How can you be this hated? How can you have bought a team for 25 years to be loved and have wound up killing your reputation and your family's reputation along the way while printing $2 billion? I mean, you know, it's quite a price to pay, because I don't know anyone else who's made $2 billion over the last 20 years by having a business and a brand that most people think stinks. Literally.
Yeah, again, we've talked about this before too. I think the general public's opinion about him and their family will be much different than the opinion based solely on their handling of the Orioles. So you'll get mixed reviews at that point. I mean, people still claim that he is, you know, one of the most charitable people in our town. And, you know, that's writing a check, stroking a check, and, you know, take that for whatever it's worth. He takes it in one side, and then instead of spending it on players, he's spending it elsewhere, which people, will say is a noble cause. But it sure doesn't make people come to the games, and it sure doesn't make you feel like the Orioles of the 80s, the team that you fell in love with, is the same team today. But I think that's true for all of baseball, really. I don't know. Maybe not.
Well, if you fell in love with Barry Trotz last month, you're not going to be in love with him in 4 months. And at some point, Ovechkin's not going to be here. And at some point, very, very soon, Manny Machado and Adam Jones aren't going to be here. So the reasons you love the team and the reasons you love baseball, or you like being outside, or you love the people you go with, or, you want to pass it on to your kids and all of that other stuff. I hear that every minute of every day. But at some point, no one's going to the games right now, and that's not good for our community. And that goes back to the roots of why is the team here? Why did we spend public money building a stadium that we're still paying for as a community? Well, it was to inject life into our community. And right now, that's missing, and I guess that's what I'm writing about. The Dear Oriole series is here. Bill Cole is my friend from Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. Tell everybody about how to get in touch with you, and give them a little James Bond on the Pfister Energy side. I always like to hear you talk about that because it does sound very James Bond to me.
Sure. Well, we're out on the web, obviously, coleroofing.com and pfisterenergy.com. I think what you're referring to, James Bond, which I like to think we're simplifying this a little bit more so that it doesn't necessarily feel that way. Like, I don't want it to be covert spy activities. I would.
You don't want to be confused with Blofeld, right?
Well, someday. We're going to want to have discussions about commercial rooftops where people want to know how much it costs to have a regular roof and a solar roof, because we have this open space. We can put solar panels up there, and you can start generating your own power, thus reducing the amount of money you have to pay to BG&E. It can be a very game-changing sort of investment for your facility and your company. It adds a secondary revenue stream. It comes with a whole bunch of tax credits, which make it very attractive. And at the end of the day, the way we're putting it on, as long as it's got a roof by Cole Roofing underneath of it, I think it's a safe platform to build a small power plant so that we can sort of disconnect from maybe one of the last remaining monopolies in our country, but that's probably a whole nother story.
You're going to go antitrust. That's part 2. That's next week. We'll bring that's how the National showed up in D.C. to begin with, was antitrust. So, and the threats of antitrust. But that's in the Peter Principles. You can go back and check that. I think it's maybe Chapter 5, Chapter 6. Tell everybody how to find you. Just coleroofing.com. You want them to give you a call? What do you want them to do if they have a commercial roof situation?
Sure. Phone number is 410-242-0600. You can call that. You can talk roof. You can talk solar. I'm sure whoever answers, you could talk about the Orioles or the Ravens as well. We're happy to help anybody in any situation. So just want to be a good partner in the community.
Free the birds, Bill Cole. That's all I can say. I'm wearing my Free the Birds hat and my Believe shirt. It's quite a mixed message.
Well, that's kind of Nestor from my perception.
Just when you think you got me figured out. It's a Roddy Piper. Right. Just when you think you have all the answers, I change the question. So, all right, it's Dear Orioles all month long because what the hell else are we going to do besides go to the All-Star game in Washington, or as you like to call it, Washington, which is fun. Right. Billy, be well, man. Great having you on this week as always. Appreciate your support.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much.
Bill Cole, Cole Roofing, Pfister Energy, playing the role of Dr. Melfi here at WNST on a weekly basis. So you can find him out at Cole Roofing. You can find me in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. They're racing at Laurel this weekend. They're want to give you a formal invite down to the air-conditioned, beautifully remodeled sports bar lounge. It's fantastic. Get down there, bet the ponies. The entries are on the front of WNST.net. They're also in the morning newspaper each and every day. If there's any breaking news, trades, Big things. Manny Machado dealt off to the Arizona Diamondbacks. You'll get it first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. You know, I haven't even hauled up my co-roofing mug here for the WNSTV camera and the YouTube live streams that we do around here. It's all up at WNST.net. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live even when I'm sitting in Pizza John's with my wife eating cheesesteak subs and eating those delicious French fries. And the Orioles are actually winning, not losing. So maybe if I lived at Pizza John's, they'd win 162 games. I know I gain weight because the pizza's good. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.